Hello everyone and welcome to this another episode of GDDV 106 Development Concepts. My name is Kasanis. Alright guys, we are going to continue along with week 3. We're moving along pretty darn well here. We took a look at the course intro, we took a look at the Unity interface, we talked about scripting in general. We talked about the idea of data types. We talked about the idea of functions. We talked about the idea of classes. In the very last episode, we talked about the idea of arrays. It was the final data type that I actually wanted to talk about, I think. Today, we are going to move on to the idea of conditional statements. All right, let's get started. Okay, so conditional statements. We're going to talk about a number of different conditional statements and the branching operators that are going to work with those particular conditional statements. We're going to examine today the if statement, the ternary operator, and the switch statement. And each of these operates similarly in the fact that they allow us to branch to one set of code or the other. And that's basically what it does based on our conditional statements. We're going to talk about the if statement first of all. And with the if statement, the if statement basically allows the code to make a decision based on specified criteria. And that specified criteria is our conditional statement. The example is if conditional statement, then do this. That's basically the form it takes. As an example, if x is less than 0, then do this. If, open bracket, x is less than 0, close bracket, open brace, code, closed brace. Now, just like we talked about in the past, the open and closed braces, the curly braces, are utilized to define the scope of the if statement. The commands within the curly braces will only be issued if the conditional statement is true. Otherwise, it will completely skip those lines of code. Now, the use of the curly braces allows for multiple lines to be included within the scope of an if statement. However, if you only have one line of code, the curly braces are not necessary. So as an example, if x is less than 0, print x is perfectly fine. The curly braces are not required in order to run that code. However, if x is less than 0, print x equals 0, well, if x is less than 0, it will print whatever the value of x is, but it will always run the x equals 0 afterwards. It will always run that. And that's because that falls outside of the scope of the if statement. Okay, so if you've got multiple lines of code, make sure that you include the curly braces. Basically, what happens is if the conditional statement, that being x is less than 0, if the conditional statement is true, run the code. Otherwise, don't run the code. Now, we can extend our if statement using an else statement, and the else statement will catch every other condition. So as an example, if x is less than 0, run this, else run that. In this particular example, anytime x is less than 0, it will run the code within the braces of the if statement. Otherwise, the else statement will catch every other condition. So anytime x is greater than 0 or equal to 0, the else condition will be run. All right, so that's really important to note. It will run one or the other. And once again, the curly braces are used to define the scope of the code that's included within the particular statement, either the if or the else statement. It is absolutely possible to nest your if statements. So this is a condition that you'll find quite often where we have if something is true, else do this. So what we've got here is if x is less than 0, run this code, else if x is greater than 10, then run this code, otherwise run this code. All right, so if, else if, else. And basically we just have nested if statements within here. That's all this is. Now, in the first conditional statement, x is less than 0, the code will be run if that is true. Otherwise, it's going to fall into the next one. It will check. If x is greater than 10, it will run that code. But if our x value is not less than 0 and it's not greater than 10, then the final else will catch every other condition. Okay, so an else statement isn't necessary. You don't have to have your else statement. It's there to catch every other condition. Just realize that your else is always there to catch everything else. Okay, and it's also really important to note that we can have any number of if statements, but when they're nested like this, those if statements will be run sequentially. As soon as the first if statement is true, it will not fall into the next else statement, and it will skip all the additional code. So if you have 100 if statements all nested under if-else statements, then you're only going to find the one condition that's true, And once it finds the first condition that's true, it's going to jump out of your 100 if statements, your 100 nested if statements, and run the code associated with the conditional statement that is true. Okay, so it's really important to know that. It's really important to understand that. These are the conditional statements that are applicable. And again, depending on the data type you've got here, some of these might not be necessarily applicable, but these are the ones that are available to you. X equals y means if X is equal to y. A lot of times, a lot of first-time programmers will mix up this conditional statement and put X equals y. And that is not a comparison. You require the double equal sign in order for this conditional statement to actually operate. X is greater than y. So if X is greater than y, this is true. X is less than y. If X is less than y, then this is true. X is greater than or equal to y, meaning that the value of X is either greater than or equal to the value of y. So if X and y are the same, this will be true. And if X is greater than the value of y, this is also true. X is less than or equal to y. Once again, two conditions kind of met here at the same time. If X is equal to the value of y is true. Additionally, if X is less than the value of y, then again, this is true. X does not equal y. In this particular situation, if X is not the same as y, then this is true. Not X is the opposite condition, so if this is false. And just lastly, X meaning true. So if I wanted to, I could simply say if true, or if false. And if true will always run. And if false will always not run. All right? Because if it's false, if you're giving it a value of false immediately, it's never going to run. If you give it a value of true, it will run every single time, right? Because true is always true and false is always false. All right, guys? So those are the conditional statements that you can include within your if statement. Now, we can also have conditional statements that are put together, so that are kind of compound conditional statements. And we can utilize the and or the or values in order to check whether or not this is true. With the and value, both conditions need to be true. And with the or value, one or of the other conditions need to be true in order for this to pass by. So if X is greater than 0 and X is less than 10, if both of these conditions are true, then we will return a true value and it'll run the if statement. Or if I suggest if X is greater than 0, or, so / or line, X is less than 10, as long as one of these conditions are true, then it's going to actually, going to run. So if one or of the others is true, and in fact, I think that if X is an integer value, it's always going to be the case, right? Is there a case where this doesn't work? So if X is less than 10, so -1 is less than 10, and and 11 is greater than 0, these conditions will probably always be true unless X is undefined, if I use that particular example. All right, so you got to be smart in how you're using it, otherwise you're going to run into problems. So the and operator and the or operator will allow you to either check two conditions or more. You can have any number of these conditions. I can have X is greater than 0 and X is less than 10 and X equals 5. X equals 5 is a perfectly good condition, but it'll only work in the condition that X is equal to 5. Or we could have X is greater than 0 and X is less than 10, or X is greater than 100. That also is a perfectly valid statement. In that particular case, it will evaluate both of those initial conditions and then afterwards compare it to the or. Okay, so you can have any number of these statements with these operators being used together in order to create yourself a compound conditional statement. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's do a quick little surprise test here. Given the following code, what will we see in the console, assuming that X equals 5? If X is greater than 4, print X is greater than 4. If X equals 5, print X is equal to 5. Okay, so given these two lines of code, what do we expect to see? In the case where we assuming X is equal to 5, well, the first condition is met. If X is greater than 4, then it's going to print X is greater than 4, and X also equals 5, so therefore it's going to print, we're going to see two print statements, X is greater than 4, and we're going to see X is 5. Now, in the next set of code, utilizing the if and else if statement, again, where X is equal to 5, if X is greater than 4, print X is greater than 4, else if X equals 5, print x is 5. In this form, all we're going to see is x is greater than 4, right? The first conditional statement is met, x is greater than 4, and therefore it will no longer check any of the additional statements. So hopefully you got that, and if you did, then you understand the if statement. Awesome! Let's go on here to the idea of the ternary operator. I don't use the ternary operator very often. I know some people who do, so I'm going to cover it here just so you've got it in your arsenal of code. So let's take a look at what it is. Basically, the way it works is there's a Boolean condition, and the Boolean condition is evaluated, and it's either true or false. And then based on that true or false condition, the results of that true or false condition, it returns one of the results based on that value. That's a little bit confusing. So here's how it looks. There's a conditional statement, question mark, result of true, colon, result of false. If the conditional statement is true, then it's going to return the result true. If the conditional statement is false, it's going to return the result false. So let's take a look at an example here, and I'm going to use enums just for some additional practice. All right, guys, because we covered enums before. They can be a little bit confusing, so we're going to throw in some little extra complication here utilizing the enum just so you get a little bit more practice. So I'm going to declare an enum temp that has a value of either hot or cold. I'm then going to declare a variable called today temp that is an enum temp. That's what it is. And I'm going to declare an integer variable called temp degrees, and I'm going to set it equal to 33. This is all just pseudocode, obviously. Now, the ternary operator works as follows. I'm going to return something to today temp, and because today temp is an enum, I'm going to return one of the enum values from temp. So today temp is equal to temp degrees. This is my Boolean condition. Temp degrees is greater than 28. If that is true, it's going to return temp.hot. And if it's false, it's going to return temp.cold. So today temp equals temp degrees greater than 28, question mark, temp.hot, colon, temp.cold. I have set the value of temp degrees to 33. Therefore, today temp will have a value of temp.hot. Okay? That is the ternary operator. That's the ternary operator. Okay? We're going to move on to the idea of the switch statement. Okay, guys, so listen, if you didn't understand the ternary operator, don't worry. We're going to actually see it in the practical example. It's much easier to explain things when we're actually looking at an operation, I find anyway. I'm much more of a person who likes to get their hands dirty than actually hearing lectures. But I have to tell you these things too. There's other people that learn through being told. So anyway, guys, this switch statement. Let's go on to the switch statement. And the switch statement it allows you to compare a singular variable to a number of different predefined constants. That's what it basically does. You cannot use as your case comparison. You can't actually use any kind of conditional statement. So I'm including it within the conditional statement video here just because it does allow for branching path and control within your code, but you actually can include a conditional statement. The only conditional statement that's there is if your variable matches exactly the variable within the comparison. That's it. That's what you're doing here. The following format is used to create yourself a switch statement. So the keyword switch, within brackets, you put the variable that you wish to compare. Afterwards, we've got ourselves a set of braces, and those braces, once again, define the entirety of the switch statement. Within the switch statement, we have a case, and the case will then have a compare value. That compare value, whatever it is going to have to exactly match the variable. If it exactly matches the variable, then you're going to do whatever it is within that particular case. Afterwards, we're looking for that keyword break. Now, that keyword break is utilized to end execution. That's what it's there for. If there's a successful comparison between the variable and the case statement, it will execute any of the code up until the keyword break, and then afterwards it will jump out of the case statement. Now, it's really important to note that you must have the keyword break within C#. In Unity C#, you must have the keyword break associated with your switch statement. In other languages, you don't have to have it. In other languages, if you've left the keyword break out, then you will fall through to the next case. But that is not the situation in C#. You must have the break keyword at the end of your case statement before your next case comparison. If you don't have that break statement, it's going to throw an error and say, hey, you're missing something. So make sure that it's there. Now, so it will not fall through. Now, the break ends the execution. However, if you've gone through the entirety of your comparisons and you have not found a match, you can utilize the keyword default to catch everything else. So if it goes through and says, nope, 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 it's going to land on the default, and then it's going to run the code within the default. Now, I just want to make sure I state again that there's no braces or anything like that confines the code within your case. Doesn't define the scope within your case at all. It is the keyword break that defines the end of your code within a case. So it's going to take the following format. Switch variable case A, do something, no break here. I didn't put a break in, and therefore there's no fall through, and it's going to throw an error. All right, so you have to have a break. Case B, compare B. If it matches exactly, then do the something and then break. And otherwise, hit that default keyword, do something, hit the break, and end the execution of your switch statement. Okay, so that is how a switch statement works. What I'd like to do now is head into Unity and take a look at a practical example of the if statement, the ternary operator, as well as the switch statement. Okay, I'll see you in Unity. So here we are inside of the array demonstration script, and we're going to be using myArray as well as this enum that I've defined here. In this enum, temp has a value of either hot or cold, and I've assigned a variable, today temp, as a temp enum. So today temp can either be hot or cold. I've also created an integer temp degrees that has a value of 33. And we're just going to be looking at the example. Let's look at that right now. Actually, let's scroll down here and take a look at the example. It's inside of our start function. So inside of our start function, we've got our ternary example here. And this is the example straight out of the lecture. Today's temp equals temp degrees is greater than 28. Is it? If it is, send this true value back. If it's not, then send this false value back. All right, so if temp degrees is greater than 28, send hot. If temp degrees is not greater than 28, then send cold. We've got temp degrees set to 33, and therefore today's temp is going to be equal to hot. When we actually see the print statement, it's going to say hot. It's not going to say temp.hot, it's just going to say hot. That's the comparison you're looking for, just hot. Okay, so now let's go up here into our start function and take a look what else we're doing. The only other line of code that I've kept is this test value. And test value, I'm testing my array and I'm testing element 0. Let's go down to test value and take a look at what it is. So test value is our if and our switch statements. And I'm basically allowing for the parameter list to include only x, a value, an integer value of x. And I'm using the integer value of x in my if statement as well as my switch statement. Inside of the if statement, I've got, well, first of all, I have this print saying I'm actually testing x and what the x value is equal to, and it's in the if statement. Then we check to see if x is less than 0. If x is less than 0, then we're going to print x is less than 0. If it's not, it's going to fall into this else, and then it's going to say, okay, is x greater than 4? If it is greater than 4, then it's going to say x is greater than 4. If it's not greater than 4, then it's going to fall into this particular statement. Now, the problem is, this next statement is x equals 5. Now, x equals 5 is greater than 4. What I'm showing you here is a number of different things with this if statement. I'm showing you how easy it is to have flawed logic within your if statement. If you're not careful in your if statement, conditional statements, you can definitely fall into a situation where your if statement is working as you've coded it, but the logic behind your code is completely wrong. This will not throw an error. It's never going to say, whoa, you got an error here, like other things, if I've got syntax error or something like that. This is just not going to work. So let's take a look at why. If x is greater than 4, well, then it's going to be caught here. If it's not greater than 4, it's going to fall to this next one. If x is equal to 5, then print x is equal to 5. Now, even if x is equal to 5, the problem is it gets caught here. X is greater than 4. If x is equal to 5, well, that's greater than 4. So it's going to end its condition right here. It's going to say, yep, this is true. It's going to print x is equal to 4, and then it's going to dump out of the if statement. It's never going to fall into this else. So no matter what happens, we will never, ever, ever see this condition to be true. We'll never, ever even do this comparison. The condition might be true, but we'll never do the comparison, and therefore it will never run this code. Okay. Then down here we have our last one. This catches everything else. Okay, well, it's not less than 0, and it's not greater than 4, and therefore it's got to be greater than 5. Well, again, this is my error, right? This is an error that I've created in here. This statement is supposed to catch everything else. Well, it doesn't catch everything else. It just catches the conditions that are not here. X is greater than 5 is incorrect, right? Because it'll be caught by this particular one here. Again, my logic is going to be incorrect as far as this print statement is concerned. We will never see this. If we take a look at a value of 2, well, X is not less than 0, it's 2, so it's going to fall down here. X is not greater than 4, so it's going to fall down one more. X does not equal 5, and therefore it's going to fall in this else statement. It's going to catch everything else. X is equal to 2 is not greater than 5, so you got to make sure that you put everything else that's proper within here, all right? So this is a demonstration of improper logic within an if statement. This will never be caught by the compiler. It is a logic statement, all right, a logic error. Now let's go down here and take a look at our switch statement. Testing X in the switch statement. X is equal to, again, we're printing this out, and we're doing a direct comparison. It has to match one of these values. If it doesn't match one of these values, it'll be caught by the default down here. So switch X is equal to 0. If it is, print X is equal to 0, break. X is equal to 5. Well, if it is, print out X is equal to 5, and then break. X is equal to 10. If it is, print it out, then break. Otherwise, it's going to fall into my default statement, and it's going to be caught here. X is not equal to 0, 5, or 10. And then it's going to break out. Okay? So let me file save this to make sure we've got it saved. And let's give it a run. Actually, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to show you right away what happens. This is something I talked about in the last video, a condition where you are trying to access elements outside of the length of an array. What I'm doing here is I'm supposed to be looking at the array size, my array at element number 1, or the 0th array element. And I don't have any array size right now. If I hit play, watch what happens. I end up with an index out of range exception. So because I'm trying to access an array that has no length, or I'm trying to access it outside of that particular length, I'm going to get this index out of range exception. Okay, so you have to make sure that if you get this error, you're going to know what it is. You're outside of your array boundaries for whatever reason, and you can go ahead and correct it. Okay, this is something that happens fairly frequently whenever we are accessing our array. If we haven't gone through and properly assessed the size of our array, the length of our array, then we can often fall into this index out of range exception. Let me just clear this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into 1, and I'm going to add different values in here. So we're actually looking at our 0th element, and let's start off with a value of, 5. Okay, so when I hit 5 here, I put this in. When I hit play, we're expecting to see, first of all, we're expecting to see that that X is greater than 4 from the if statement. We're expecting to see that our case statement, X is equal to 5, is true. And we're also expecting to see the word hot because it is temperature itself. The ternary operator is hot. When I hit play, we get ourselves what we expect. So we're comparing X is equal to 5, X is greater than 4, which is our if statement, which is true. We're testing our switch statement, X is equal to 5, which is great, and we're getting our word hot. So our ternary operator worked, our if statement worked as far as that particular condition is concerned, and our switch statement has worked as far as that particular condition is concerned. Let's change this up to a value of 2. So instead of our element being 5, we're going to change it to 2, and I'm once again going to hit play. Now hot will still be the same. We're going to hit our default for our switch, and our if statement is going to give us a completely incorrect statement. So hit play, and we can see if X is equal to 2, X is greater than 5. Logic error. Down here, testing X is equal to 2 in our switch, and X is not equal to 0, 5, or 10, which is absolutely correct, and it's still hot. It's actually hot where I'm at right now. It's probably 33 degrees where I'm at right now as well. That's Celsius, guys. If you're not from Canada, that's Celsius, and that's hot. Anyway, that's what I wanted to show you guys. So that is the code itself. Okay, the ternary operator, the if statement, and then the switch statement. That's what I really want to take a look at in this particular video. I really hope that was helpful to you. Understanding the logic behind what you're trying to do is important. Start off by understanding the logic, and then afterwards write your code. I have too many students. There's too many initial programmers that don't start by trying to work through the logic of what they want to do. They just start right away coding or building or whatever it is they're going to do. They start right away with the actual physical act of writing their code or building their game, coding their game, without actually going through and understanding the design of what it is you're trying to do first. Start by understanding the logic of what you want to do, and then these logical statements are going to be great. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I actually want you to give me a thumbs down if you didn't like something, but I'd really appreciate it if you told me what you didn't like. If it's something in the way I teach, well, I can do something about that. If it's the fact that you don't like my voice, or you don't like how bald I am, or whatever it is, well, I can't do anything about that. All right, guys? If you don't like it, let me know with a thumbs down, and then tell me what you don't like, and I will go do my best to make sure that I improve with the next video. All right, guys? Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.